quite complementary to what I've been doing. I mean, I'm mainly using, or I've mainly just used on-market deals so far, mainly because obviously that's where it's easiest to get a fair amount of good data. And there is no Craigslist here in Norway, but in essence, using similar approaches to find off-market deals on Craigslist sounds pretty promising to me as well. Anyone who's, except for Mark, obviously, who has thought in that direction, or maybe has some experiences?
It seems to me like it's going to be pretty difficult, aside from Craigslist. It's going to be pretty difficult to use AI to find off-market deals because there's no digital source of information for them. You know, you have to talk with people or have contacts. But where AI can really excel is in finding publicly listed properties that are maybe undervalued and would be quickly snapped up. The AI can do it much faster than any human could. And in identifying properties with a value add component, which, like the just intrinsically undervalued listings, want to be snapped up quickly by people. That's where it seems like it would excel, to me at least. That's where my mind goes.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to when I was inquiring, I was sometimes inquiring with like off market deals in a sense. Like I would, for example, look at the rental ads that people like landlords had out, and I thought, well, that looks like a nice flat, right? And there's still often enough data to put into my models to come up with like a quick estimate on what the market value of that rental could be, and then I know like is it how performant is, like maybe they try to rent it from much too high of a rent, and maybe then they struggle with it, and you could like write them. And then I would specifically ask them for data points, like what's the year it was built and on these kind of things, because I know that's what my models need in a sense. So, but it's more painstakingly for sure, yeah. But maybe you could still automate that, like if you made a funnel like where people basically find you that would be interested for selling, and then you kind of have an online form where they have to fill out the information your models need in a sense. There could still be a nice automated way for lead generation.
Yeah.
Not sure if you need AI for that, really. I guess you could just do it with simple filtering too, but could help you maybe sort through the stuff that people submit then.
I'm curious if, either, how do you say it? Is it Severin?
My English-speaking friend says Severin.
Severin? Okay.
Sev. You can say Sev. That's maybe easiest.
In where you live, is there an issue of a lot of price variation, just even within a zip code or some smaller region? Like, I know like where I live, it's very, prices are hyper local, and you could be in one part of town and maybe a quarter mile away, prices are drastically different, even though they have the same zip code. I just wonder, in terms of building a model, when we're looking at aggregate features, maybe by zip code, or pulling in crime statistics by zip code, do you see this as how do we reconcile the need to aggregate at some level with the hyper-local nature of real estate investing?
Another great question. As I said, so far I've used both GPS coordinates as well as these like municipality internal numberings they have, like zip codes, of course, right? There's zip codes, and then there's like levels underneath that which have their own ordering for like parts of the city or something, and that already helps a lot. I mean, I guess you could imagine. There's a couple of things you could try. One thing is that you have the main category, for example, per zip code, but then you also have some information on, for example, how far from the center of the zip code the property is. Maybe even the direction could tell you something as well. I've tried a little bit of that kind of stuff, but it didn't really give much. Yeah, and my market definitely has the local variations as well. My market is very strange because it's like on several islands in the ocean. It's almost quasi one-dimensional, as the physicist in me would call it. So that the stuff that's like far out from the land mass has quite low prices because it's super windy and it's like far to get to anywhere. So people pay like it's almost like half the prices that you find a little closer to the city center. But I mean, the problem with machine learning is there's so much trial and error. Like you have when you set out to find an answer for something you're wondering about using machine learning, it seems like you never know what you're going to end up with. You just have to sit down, look at the data, build a model, and take it from there. It's very hard to know upfront what's going to work and what won't.
Hey, Seb, this is Andrea. I have a question regarding you mentioned you have this categorical feature that is kind of like zip code like, and I wonder how you encode that for the models, because I know like if you have a categorical feature with a high cardinality, machine learning models may suffer, and I wonder if you do like one-hot encoding or you use other encoding strategies for that particular feature.
To be quite frank, because my local market is quite small, I haven't yet done anything but feed that into the models as is. I know that's not ideal by far. Usually, I mean, the problem is if I use one-hot encoding, I just end up having way too little data. So then you need to do some more fancy stuff and maybe some sort of form of clustering to group these categorical features together. Because here we're talking about, like you said, high cardinality categories, right? So this starts being pretty tricky pretty quickly. But you caught me a little bit with my pants down, because now I realize I haven't actually treated that very part of the models as you actually should be treating it. I'm using the models that work best are extreme gradient boosting models, and they don't seem to care so much about exactly this. In practice at least, but it's definitely something that you should be aware of. But maybe to kind of like shoot the question back to you, what are your thoughts? Have you explored this, or maybe somebody else? What would you say is a good way of treating this? Because again, one-hot encoding, you end up having too little data pretty quickly, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a background in machine learning. I just like started exploring about 1 year ago, starting like looking at machine learning. So I tried to do something similar, and what I ended up doing is probably something trivial and naive, is to just get some medium values for each zip code. For example, like what is the medium price for this particular zip code? And instead of feeding the zip code itself to the model, I just feed these medium values for the particular area.
As inputs into the model, or?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Well, technically, you also have to be a little bit careful with that in terms of information leakage. I mean, this is probably not going to be a super big deal in practice, but the thing you're trying to predict is influencing the median value, right? So you have a little bit of a circular dependence thing going on there.
Yeah, I'm
so something to be aware of.
Ways. So that's kind of why I wanted to ask you if you did something like in that area.
Nothing too concrete yet, but yeah, it is a good point.
Has anyone looked into using computer vision for anything? Actually, Shafi and I connected yesterday, and we're talking a little bit about that. I'm still at the early stage of writing a web scraper to grab images, but then the whole painstaking process of then labeling them, it's kind of overwhelming. But that's kind of what I do. So I work at Nike. I'm a product manager, but do the visual search. So take a picture of a shoe and get shoe results back. So looking to apply that same thing to properties, go into like, hey, my high level thought is like, okay, like identify what room it is. Like, hey, that's a bathroom, that's a kitchen, that's a bedroom, that's a basement, whatever it is. And then identify things like, hey, that's an out of date kitchen. That needs an update. That's an out-of-date bathroom, and then try to basically identify value-add opportunities. That's kind of what my initial thought process is. So I'm just curious if you've even looked at using that, Severin, or.
I thought about it quite a bit. That's an interesting approach. Actually, I haven't looked into it, but my first intuition would be: has somebody trained some models on recognizing bedrooms and bathrooms? And I think the chance that the answer is yes is pretty good.
Probably.
At least I seem to remember some papers the last years which were like generative methods creating pictures of bedrooms, for example. So clearly there's some knowledge of what a bedroom is there. So I think you could probably look if there's models that can help you with that. In terms of figuring out whether or not it's a value add component there, that's a little bit more tricky. What I thought about is, again, using pre-trained networks and just, for example, using that somehow to extract feature values, like basically from the visuals, and then having that as input in a model that would try to predict the market value, right? And kind of that way learning, okay, what are the connection between the feature vector, the different features that you get from the visuals and the market values. And you probably need a ton of data, but if you manage to, if you do that bit pretty okay with how you get the feature vector, then this could be a good approach. Might not help you with the value add though, but it should at least do the market value prediction models would give, because as I said, like this is one of the areas where I'm really struggling. Like it's hard to include the condition of the property the way I'm doing it, because the models basically don't see what the condition of the property is, more or less.
Yeah, it should be relatively straightforward. I think it's like a kind of two-stage classifier. First, like you're doing the core screen, like what room to what is this a picture of, and then like just getting enough. The trick is getting enough data. And I would think, certain smaller submarkets are going to have like different styles and stuff, but you see like, hey, that's an 80s kitchen, that's a 90s kitchen. I feel like it wouldn't be too crazy to do. And like, hey, if I say it's like an 80s or 90s kitchen, like, that's an opportunity to value add. And I think my market value thing will be secondary. It's like, okay, does the numbers work on basic purchase price and is this a value add or not a value add? That's kind of one. Then I'll start to do my next stage of like, I'm going to look at it personally and then eventually automate that last piece. And that's how I'm thinking about it. Just like bundle them up so I can then look at them. Like, do I want to do more? Like do a quick, like rough calculation. Hey, is this positive NPV? Do I want to, is there even an opportunity here? And is a rehab potential or not? Basically, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
It's super interesting. As I said, like I also wondering if that would be at all possible. Two quick thoughts that might be helpful. Kaggle had at some point, I think it was called Sigma something, the company, had a challenge looking into super hazy, but essentially looking at using computer vision on rental ads, I think it was, or something.
Oh, interesting.
I think it was Sigma and Kaggle. If you look for that, if you can find it, let me know, and I probably can find it somewhere. And the other thing is what I am doing is I'm using the number of photos in the ad as an input to my models, because this is super weird, and I know it's a hack, but it turns out if somebody has a property that's nice, they're going to tend to take more photos because you want to show off how nice it is with more photos, right? Whereas if you're crappy, if it's so crappy you don't even want to show the insides, it's going to end up having like 5 photos instead of 50. So I found that actually to be helpful in predicting market value as well. But it's, of course, nowhere near as fancy as what you're suggesting.
No, that makes sense, though. Yeah, that's interesting. Not surprising. You see a lot of places with they have one photo and nothing inside. You're like, wonder what it looks like. It scares off the most like real home buyer, like who are actually trying to buy a place to live in, but not necessarily investors. So that's a good signal of like potential.
That's true.
And have you looked at NLP much for? Because I know, or I forget. Sorry, I know Mark said he was looking at just like strings, but have you tried to do NLP at all? Like in like your postings or listings, like, hey, start to see like these words or whatever, how people phrase things. That can also be a good like fixer upper, those types of things. But you can start to build good models to predict based on the words used.
I've just used simple strings as well, and kind of like hand selected a few things that seem to be working, or that seem to give a slight edge in what I'm trying to predict. The data sets I have that I use on a daily basis for my own investing are, I would say, too small for that approach. But of course, if you have more data in general, I think this is a great idea. It depends. It is probably the issues, of course, it's marketing, right? So it's not like it's a super faithful depiction of what the property is really all about and what it is. So that's probably going to cause some issues. I mean, everybody puts their listings in like nice property or blah, blah. I mean, yeah, of course. So that's not going to have any predictive power. Anybody else who has any experience with this? Because this also sounds very interesting. Or any ideas?
How often would you have to retrain a model depending upon market conditions changing?
I don't know, to be honest. Again, I have most experience from a local market, and that happens to be a relatively slow market. So I feel that I don't have enough experience to really answer that. Just a thought is, of course, that usually, as far as I know, appraisers will try to stick within the last 6 months or 12 months. So you kind of, I guess you would say, okay, over which time period is, for example, the average square meter price changed by more than 5% or something? And then, well, maybe that's a time point where you should try to retrain your models. But I don't have any better answers right now, unfortunately. I got more data. I started scraping, right? And the more data I got, the better the models became. So I'm still like in that sweet spot phase. It's just the arrow keeps on going down slowly. And I just basically retrain all the time.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I should maybe mention, Emmett. One of the inputs is also, of course, like the sales, the transaction history, like what were the previous sales prices for the property, as well as if I want to know the market value of a property, one input to the model is also going to be, well, what time is it right now? Like, is it April, for example? Or are we talking 2019, 2020? So at least the models I'm using kind of also have this time component built in, and we'll learn over time how the prices develop in a sense. That makes sense. So
do you have that time component for any other characteristics?
How do you mean characteristics?
Like if you were to factor in crime rates or things like that, because neighborhoods can change over time. So
yeah, that's a good point. I'm actually not yet using any macroeconomic factors like crime rates, but this would be super interesting to include.
One other potential application for this, we've talked about finding value add properties and underpriced properties. I wonder if I haven't really thought about this, but applications for predicting properties that have high appreciation potential. You know, they've been appreciating for a long time. Probably a lot of historical data on that. Maybe we can do some, AI can help us do a solid factor analysis, a lot of variables there. So it's where a neural net might be able to come in and tease apart the factors that have led to appreciation in the past. I wonder if that's another potential avenue.
And by factors, you're also thinking about macroeconomic factors, or like not property-specific factors, but more like neighborhood and city factors?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I've been working with the regional bank here in my day job as a research scientist for a research organization. And I've been wondering, for example, could you, if you have the data from the bank, like where the cash transactions are geographically, like maybe at least on a high level, whether, like, for example, does the cash tend to flow into a neighborhood or does it tend to flow out? And I think that's a very fascinating thought. Like if you sit on that data as a bank, could you use that to, over time, find the patterns, how neighborhoods maybe expand or contract and develop based on like the flow of money between in and out? It's a little bit of a side note, but I just found it very fascinating because I have a hard time imagining that does not play a role at all.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd never thought of using the bank data, but that makes a lot of sense.
tried to sell it to them, but they're not yet ready for a research project in that direction. I hope so. But I mean, one issue, of course, with this is that even if you find what factors historically gave rise to appreciation or not, you still never know if that means that it's going to be the same for the future, right? So I guess.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I was just imagining, you're never going to get a complete closed solution to predicting appreciation, but you can have higher quality and lower quality predictions. And I was just imagining, all you really need is higher quality predictions than the other guy to make it useful. So, but that's certainly true. You'll never get.
I would love to explore this. I mean, this is super relevant. This is what a lot of people want. And if you had nice models that really could, because maybe the patterns are pretty clear. Maybe you can figure out what combination of like macroeconomic or city or neighborhood factors have the largest influence on appreciation potential. And maybe regard it more like appreciation potential, like you said, and not like this will happen, but like saying, okay, these are really strong predictors. These have been really strong predictors the last decades. It's good reason to assume that they continue to be, and then try to find markets and neighborhoods that have a large potential. Would be very interesting.
Anyone else doing anything interesting? People just here learning, I guess. Who actually a couple people said like, hey, I'm in data science, or like people just kind of like interested to learn about it. Who actually works as a data scientist out of just curiosity?
I do.
Few people.
I work at GE Aviation, so half my team builds predictive models to detect engine deterioration on flight engines, and we also do supply chain analytics, and that's what I do. I build machine learning models to help optimize the supply chain. But I really like working with all sorts of data, and I'm very interested in real estate investing, just as an investor, and meeting people like you on the call that are also analytical and interested in real estate.
Yeah, and Kevin, Kurt and I work together. He's one of the machine learning scientists.
Oh, right on. Okay.
During our conversation.
Cool. Yeah, Shafi and I met yesterday.
Nice.
Bigger pockets connection.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously why we're all here, but
I love that forum. Yeah, it's a great forum.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting feedback again, Sheree.
Sorry about that. Is it better now?
Yeah.
I always forgot about that. Yeah, I also work in data science myself, but I'm more in healthcare industry. I work at Abbott Laboratories, so I'm doing different data science projects studying heart failures and cardiovascular diseases. I recently got into real estate because I'm trying to buy our first home actually here in California, which is really competitive market. So we're trying to see, how we can best do this, leveraging my knowledge in data science and machine learning and AI. Yeah, it's super interesting stuff that you guys are sharing. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm an analyst for one of the big banks, and I work with data a lot, but on the machine learning AI side of things, I'm just starting to dip my toe into that.
So you're the one sitting in all the cash flows I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, we're keeping them.
I figured. And Kevin, you said you're mainly working with computer vision problems, or?
Yeah. So at Nike here in Portland. I'm originally Canadian, and my undergrad was computer engineering. Then I changed to the business side. So I'm leading the team. So it's like a bit of a mix. I'm not the one writing the code, but I've taken did the Udacity deep learning nano degree because I was just interested in it. And I've always wanted to get into real estate investing, and finally bought my first property this year.
Congrats.
It was like,
Awesome.
I turned 40, and I was like, now or never, man, just make it happen. So bought it, rehabbed it, and I got a tenant in there. It's like cash flowing $500 a month. So now I'm like hungry for more. But it's become really competitive with what's going on in the U.S. There's like the kind of the wealthier people have a lot of extra money on hand right now. It's not to get into politics, but yeah, it's just like it's exacerbating divides. And it's like really competitive now for properties. So where like, even a year ago, it wasn't this crazy because savings rates are so high for some people now. Yeah, it's interesting what the macroeconomic factors are going to be with all in the different markets, like different countries, I guess. It's cool to have like a mix of international people here.
Yeah, I see similar things to what you just mentioned here in Norway as well as in Austria and Germany, which I'm also familiar with. So, as you said, I think a lot of people are sitting on a lot of money looking to, where does it go, right? So, real estate is one obvious choice.
Mm-hmm.
So, even more needs for smart technology to help us find the best deals.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to peel off here, guys. But Mark, thank you very much for putting this together. It was great, and I appreciate it. And I'd be interested in connecting with some of the other people on the call here. Is there a way we could trade contact info or something to keep collaborating?
That'd be great, yeah.
I'll put my email in the chat. And then just grab it and keep talking.
I think Mark mentioned. Yeah.
I could put my LinkedIn address too, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah. Well, Kurt and I already connected on LinkedIn.
I liked what you were saying. So I get so many LinkedIn messages, and lots of people are spamming with things that I don't want to hear. But it's nice to have a group of real estate investors to connect with.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's my LinkedIn too. Yeah, I get people just want to sell me shit on LinkedIn all the time. But on the weekends, if it's a LinkedIn message, it's usually someone who's like wants to connect about like something personal.
It's the weekends, okay? Yeah. Clever.